In the interest of time, I will stop paying attention to the chat for a moment and the admitting people in and sort of formally transition to my role of welcoming everybody. So hi to all. My name is Laura DeVoe, and I am the founder and executive director of Women Who Lead, which, in case you didn't know, is the organization that is hosting this event. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to today's event on acknowledging and overcoming imposter syndrome. And I feel like for the first time ever, we're able to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening all at the same time, given where our attendees are logging in from. For those of you who don't know, Women Who Lead is a volunteer-led nonprofit organization with a mission to passionately engage, educate, and empower women leaders. The content that we offer as a network helps to equip women with the skills they need to advance their careers and pursue positions of leadership. Women Who Lead started off as an organization targeting women explicitly, but we are inclusive in our mission that we do not exclude anyone based on how they identify. So we're happy to see sort of a range of attendees joining us today. So thank you to all, and we hope that you feel supported and included throughout this conversation and future activities. We hosted our first virtual event in June 2020 to ensure that our community remains supported in what everyone knows to be a sort of unprecedented and challenging time. We continue to learn as we go, and we're grateful for your continued support as we do so. Because of you, Women Who Lead has been able to amplify our contribution to support women in their career advancement and leadership pursuits. As always, we welcome your thoughts on potential topics we could cover, speakers, and network sponsorship opportunities. At least half of the support that we have received to date has come through our network members and their contacts either at their organization or just generally. So on that note of support, what a better topic to cover than our shared experience around imposter syndrome. It's that, who do I think I am feeling that I had when I started Women Who Lead? And that, you know, who am I to do this feeling that I think a lot of us probably have on a daily basis if we're honest. And then something like this event happens, and it's a topic that resonates so broadly that it draws interest from 500 people across the globe. People who understand the sweaty combination of nerves and excitement that I can guarantee you every single one of our panelists is feeling right now, since I know I'm feeling it and I'm not even the center of attention. So with that being said, let's show them a virtual round of applause. You can see the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to help virtually create the safe and supportive space that we're so well known for in person. So I don't know if our panelists can kind of, oh wait, does that not work now? This is how tech illiterate I am. Does that not work because we can't see everybody's video because Jenny's screen is up here? We might have to go to gallery view. So if you can't see the clapping, maybe people can sort of shout their encouragement in the chat, because I know that our panelists are brilliant humans who have been preparing for this event for a while, and they want nothing more than all of you to sort of feel supported as a community and to sort of tackle the shared experience of imposter syndrome together. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's moderator, Jenny Catton.
Hi, everyone.
Jenny is the manager of strategy for Women Who Lead, and she's a director at UHN. I say director only instead of her full title, because it won't matter what Jenny is leading. She has and always will succeed because of who she is and how she shows up. So I don't really think her title matters. I think by the end of this conversation, you'll know Jenny, or maybe Jennifer, more as Jenny, the way we know her, and she'll need no introduction, and her title will become irrelevant because of how wonderful she is. For those reasons and many others, which I won't get into, or else I'll get the second degree from her later, there's no better woman to put at the helm of this conversation to embody the authenticity that this requires. So Jenny, I will turn the virtual mic over to you. You will all be brilliant. I can't wait to see the direction this conversation takes. We have hysterical clapping in the chat. We have roaring applause in the chat. You give people all the feels. So that's the encouragement that's coming in. So Jenny, take it away.
Well, thank you. And I think that I've already shown my pushy nature by trying to interrupt my own introduction. So Thank you very much, Laura. And so, yes, my name is Jenny. I go by Jennifer. On paper, it confuses absolutely everyone. Jenny, Jen, I go by it all. A little bit about myself, just to start us off. As mentioned, I am a very proud employee of UHN. My career has always been in change management, project management, and it's really been a nice tie to my completely impatient personality that my joy is to do and bring things to life. On a more personal note, I am an amateur chef. I drink a lot of wine along with my cooking. And I am firmly a city girl that really appreciates the outdoors in small bursts. So I also welcome any recommendations for hikes. I am absolutely honored to moderate this discussion today. And by my side, I have three extraordinary humans that I will allow to introduce themselves. And so I'll first start with Dr. Emma Bell.
Hi. Well, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, so I'm Emma, Dr. Bell, if you're my bank. And I also work for UHN. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at Princess Margaret Cancer Centre. My research interests are ovarian cancer, generally gynecological health, and I work to, like my long-term researchy plans are to improve outcomes for people undergoing gynecological healthcare. The way that I do that is through bioinformatics. So I'm a programmer, and yeah, I spend all day tapping at my computer and then shouting at my computer because it never behaves. And I suppose if you recognize me or whatever, I was sort of briefly famous on the internet for 15 minutes last week because I called Elon Musk Space Karen because he used his platform to say unhelpful things about COVID-19 testing. And apparently that hit a nerve. In terms of, I feel I should give an interesting fact. I have a high school diploma in agricultural science. There we go.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Emma. Alrighty, and now it's my pleasure to hand it over to Dr. Laura Rosella.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you to the organizers for organizing something that obviously resonated. I'm so excited and was really heartened to see the response from everyone. So really excited to be here. I'm an associate professor at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health and Epidemiology. I work mostly in the population health data space, but most recently I took a chair, Stephen Family Chair in Community Health at Trillium Health Partners, which is an amazing organization. And I'm so excited about the chair because it's really helping me focus in on community health and making a difference in community health, which I think is where the future is for the whole health system, as the whole world is seeing right now. In terms of interesting facts, I think lots of people will see that I've done a lot of education and a lot of school and lots of professional things, but what's never on my bio is that my most important education was from my grandparents. I lived with them my whole life, including as an adult when I was in university, and they taught me more than all those degrees, which I loved, but it's an important part of my education, the most precious part. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Laura. And last but not least, we have Lily Whittam today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lily, and I am a healthcare implementation nerd. It's what I love to do and have been doing for the past, oh man, I don't even know, 8 years. It seems like too long, but it's a lot of fun, and I love the people that I get to work with when I do it. I am a mom of one, and I am currently a manager at the Ministry of Health in Ontario. I love that we have people from all around the world. This is so cool. Despite my career and that I'm living in the West End of Toronto, my dream has always been to live in the country and have bees and make pie. When I was a little girl, I wanted to become a pioneer. And when my mom told me that was a thing of the past, I was crushed. And then took a bit of a 180, and now here I am working in healthcare. And I do just want to say that I have a conflict of interest because of my employer, and it's really important to me to share that nothing I'm going to be speaking about today pertains to my work experiences with the Government of Ontario. I'm really honored to have been invited and to meet these amazing people that we get to talk to today about imposter syndrome.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. So before we dive right into it, I'm going to do a totally shameless plug for the mailing list. We have so many new faces with us today, and we have had a lot of requests on how you can hear about future events. And so please do use this QR code and I'll take you to our mailing list. We promise we do not spam you. We do provide, I'd like to think, helpful recaps of each of our events, and then it'll only be used to let you know about upcoming events. Alrighty. So let's dive right into it, my friends. And we are here today to talk about imposter syndrome. And so I wanted to start us off with a bit of a collective reflection activity. So if everyone, you can close your eyes, you can keep them open. I personally don't mind which option you choose, but I'm gonna go over 3 scenarios, and I want you to think to yourself whether anything that I'm about to say has gone through your own mind. So number 1. Wow, this great thing that I just did. It was pure luck. I am so lucky that that actually worked out. Number 2, whew, I am so happy that that actually worked out because it is never happening again. There's no way that I can replicate that. Or my personal favorite is, wow, I really did just deliver that incredible accomplishment, but really couldn't have happened without Catherine. And for the record, Catherine is my boss, and she's on, so hi, Catherine. So I totally recognize that that was a bit of a cheesy opening, but I'm sure many of you have got the punchline. If you said yes to any of the above, or the graph that's on the slide right now resonates with you, you have come to the right talk. And so imposter syndrome is incredibly prevalent. And I think the key indication of that is the fact that we have hundreds of you from across the globe that have come and felt compelled to talk about your experiences with us today. And so that's really the first lesson. Take a look around virtually. You are not alone. And imposter syndrome is felt by everyone. And I think that that's illustrated even more by, I think we would all say, the arguably very successful humans that are showing up on this slide right now. And so what is imposter syndrome? Well, imposter syndrome is Laura sending me this image last week, asking if I'd ever seen it before, and me immediately going into an internal panic attack going, oh my God, I've never seen this image before. Should I have seen this image before? I'm moderating an event on imposter syndrome. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna do a terrible job. Why isn't Laura moderating it? Laura would do a much better job at this. And really just spiraling out of control internally, while on the external having a completely composed face while still talking to Laura face to face. So what is imposter syndrome? It is an unwarranted sense of insecurity. And so, although I did just see this image for the first time last week, I do think that it is a really great representation of what we all feel. That so many of us think that everyone else around us knows absolutely everything that we know, but they know a little bit more, they're a little bit more skilled. When the reality is that we all just know different things and bring different strengths to the table. And frankly, that's kind of what makes the world beautiful. And so we all know it as imposter syndrome. But it was actually first studied by a woman named Pauline Clance, who studied it under the name of imposter phenomenon. And she's actually said, when all is said and done, looking back on it, she would have actually called it imposter experience. And the reason for that is that it's not a syndrome, it's not a mental illness, it's simply a feeling that we all share at one time or another. And so it is a common misconception that imposter syndrome is only felt by women, but it has been found to be fairly equally represented across gender. However, it is more prevalent and unfortunately disproportionately affects the experience of those that are underrepresented or disadvantaged groups. It can be triggered by a number of things. Life transitions are a big one, new career, promotion of your existing career. It's often caused by setting unrealistic expectations and thinking that those expectations are the baseline. I'm sure that that's resonated with a lot of you. It certainly resonated with me as soon as I read that. And yes, it is experienced, as we saw on that second slide, by the highly skilled and the highly educated and the highly successful, but that isn't a criteria for feeling imposter syndrome. What they found is that it actually stems from this concept called plural ignorance. And that's what's represented on this slide right now. Plural ignorance is this feeling that, or this situation where we are all feeling the exact same thing and we're all thinking the exact same thing, but none of us are vocalizing it. And so we're all just walking around and we don't actually recognize that everyone feels as big a fraud as each other. And so at this point in the exploration of imposter syndrome, there's lots of literature out there. There's lots of evidence out there. There's even a test that you can take. It is called, and I have it written down, the Clance Imposter Phenomenon Scale, if you want to Google it. And it'll tell you to what extent you experience imposter syndrome. But today is not about science. It's not about expertise. None of us on the panel are studied experts in imposter syndrome. And it's those experts that actually say the most surefire way to combat imposter syndrome is to talk about it. It's stemming from that concept about plural ignorance, is that we're all thinking the same thing and just don't realize it. And so sharing your experience with imposter syndrome is what's going to help you to overcome it. And they also say that even just knowing that there's a term for what you're feeling gives you a sense of relief. And so, my friends, I would like to think of this as step one of your relief. What you are feeling and what you have felt is called imposterism. So, with this extraordinary panel by my side and collectively with this amazing community of over 200 people from across the world, let's talk about our experiences, let's share our experiences, and we're going to unpack this phenomenon together. Alrighty, now I have to figure out how to stop sharing my screen before we go to the first question. Perfect. Alrighty, so I'm going to start with the first question. And again, stemming on this idea that the best thing we can do is simply share our experiences. My first question to my amazing panel is, can you please share an experience that you have had with imposter syndrome? And what do you think was driving that feeling? And I'm going to start with Laura.
Thanks, Jenny. I thought I would talk about the first time I remember feeling it, because when I go back to that first moment, I was about 12 years old. It really goes at the raw factors that were driving it. So the teacher pulled me aside after class. Again, I was about 12 years old, and said that I'd been chosen out of the whole school. They chose one boy and one girl to attend this prestigious provincial leadership program over the summer. And I was genuinely shocked. I'm not saying I was like, oh, what a surprise. I looked at the teacher and said, I think you made a mistake. And then when I found out who the boy was chosen, I felt even more worried about it, because he was a very popular athlete, the most popular guy in school. I was pretty shy at that point. And so I just remember this really uncomfortable feeling. I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't even want to tell my parents. And if left to my own devices, I would not have gone, because I thought that this is not for me. Some mistake has been made. And luckily I had some supportive adults around me that encouraged me to go, and it was actually pretty life-changing. And so I'm glad I went. But then when I got there, I felt even worse because I started meeting these amazing people from all over the province. And so when I reflect back and I think, what was driving that feeling that I had so early? I was 12 years old. And I think that I obviously had an ideal in my mind of who should be eligible, good enough to go to this event. And this gold standard who is perfect in so many ways. And the messaging I was getting for who that person is was coming from society, maybe from individuals, maybe through microaggressions, maybe through the media. And in time, I realized that that gold standard person actually, doesn't exist. Whoever I thought was good enough to go, that person, that human, nobody's that perfect. But it took me a long time to understand that. And it really emphasized for me the importance that external factors play in imposter syndrome. And that's, I think, really key to helping us understand how we proceed and how we deal with it, and how I've been a bit better about recognizing it first when it happens and understanding what it's about and what messages and what are at the root causes of it. I also think back again, if it was up to my own devices, like, as I mentioned, I think it was worrying me so much I wouldn't have gone because I just ruled myself out when I got the news. And had I not gone, I would have missed out on a very important growth experience for myself. But I think actually the people there would have missed out on something, because in retrospect, I did bring something different to that program that nobody else had. And so that's something that I hope we can talk about today, how important it is to have these multiple voices, multiple perspectives, and not let these ideals, these impossible gold standard ideals, stand in our way.
Oh, that's wonderful, Laura. And certainly, I feel that sense of this setting of an unrealistic expectation, and that we don't realize, you said it best, that gold standard that we think exists out there, I don't think it exists. We don't realize, hey, Laura, you're that gold standard. Pretty, thank you. So Lily, can you share your experience with us?
Yeah, and I'm just, what you said, Laura, really resonates. And when I was thinking about my examples of imposter syndrome, I was kind of drawing blanks because I think it's something I have felt my whole life on a daily basis. But I actually had almost the exact same experience as you, being invited to like a high school thing and thinking, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. And I'm really impressed that you are able to kind of say, yeah, I've realized that there is no gold standard. I think, that's something I'm like well into my mid 30s, and I'm still on a daily basis trying to tell myself there isn't some perfection that you have to achieve. There isn't some goal that will mean at that point in time you are accepted or that you are valued. And that's like an active dialogue that's in my head, trying to remind myself every day, you are valued, not because of your accomplishments, not because you won the 400-meter race in high school, or because you went to a prestigious grad school. It doesn't matter what all of those things are. And that in and of ourselves, we hold value. I think believing that is something that is personally hard. And I see it in my peers. It's hard for a lot of us. Like, we were raised to feel great about our achievements, and it's hard to feel great otherwise. And life isn't, especially when you're grown up now, like, it's not a series of good grades and achievements. And I think finding a way to value yourself for yourself is important, and oh my gosh, something I'm totally working on. But I think for me, that's kind of like the crux of imposter syndrome, is that history of always needing to achieve something to feel good about yourself.
So interesting. And I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people seem to have, building off both of your stories, these early life events. And I have to say, it's funny, I have the exact opposite experience where I remember in grade 6, it was a competition on who wrote the best dare. If people from Ontario remember, it was like our drug education program. Whoever wrote the best essay on how to not do drugs in the future got to present it in front of the school, and I got presented. And I got selected, and a bunch of people said that I didn't deserve it. And like grade 6 Jenny was like, excuse me, I worked my butt off on writing this thing about why you should not do drugs, and I absolutely deserve it. And so I think too, let's channel grade 6 Jenny. And I think I have to remember to channel grade 6 Jenny, because grade 6 Jenny doesn't come out as much anymore. Emma, over to you. Can you share one of your experiences with us?
First I wanted to say that, like Lily, what you just said really resonated with me. So like growing up with an Asian parent, there is that stereotype of like if you get an A, your parent comes back to you with like, why isn't it an A+? And so you're sort of conditioned over time to think that nothing is ever good enough. And I think that's something that I've spent a lot of time trying to train myself out of, because yeah, even the way that I've planned to answer this question, like I'm citing, like I was going to talk about my experiences of my PhD interviews, and so my undergraduate final year, I won the final year prize for outstanding academic achievement. That's how I was going to start that story, and now I'm thinking about that, and like, so that's why I have like that's how I was counting the value of myself in that moment. Sorry, words. Like it's as if me prefacing that story with that tangible like little award thing with a book voucher gives me something solid to hold on to feel like I am doing well, like I am good enough, when really that feeling, if it's going to be like enduring, it has to come from inside yourself rather than external awards or whatever. But yeah, to touch on my PhD, my PhD interviews. So I had absolutely no self-esteem when I finished my undergraduate degree, despite the fact that I won that little award. So I kept going into PhD interviews and absolutely like tanking them. It was painful to watch, I imagine, because I just didn't believe in myself, and I just kept setting myself up to fail. And I knew what I had to say, but I couldn't make the words come out of my mouth. My last PhD interview, I was almost in tears in the room, and I remember like when I left, I made a beeline, like I straight past all of the nice like people who wanted to talk about like what the program would be like. I went straight to the bathroom and had a nice long cry, and then when I went home, I crawled into bed and hid under the sheets, and I stayed there until the phone rang, and it was the head of the funding scheme telling me that I'd been accepted onto that PhD program. And I was so confused. Like I didn't feel happy, and I didn't feel like relieved that I'd finally like managed to overcome this weird thing that my brain was doing. I was shocked. I was confused. I was convinced it was an administrative error. Like the name Emma is the most popular girl's name from the year I was born. Maybe they meant to call a different Emma. And it took a long time for that worry that they were going to call me back and say, no, well, we've made a mistake. It took a long time for that to go away. And yeah, my PhD actually went relatively well as far as these things go. So
well, I think
it's just funny. Oh, sorry. It's just funny, like what is happening in my head is disconnected from what is happening in reality. Like, the way that my brain interprets the world is not a true mirror of the world. And I think I've had to spend a lot of time learning that in overcoming moments of imposter syndrome that I've experienced.
That's wonderful. And I think, Emma, like what you said was so powerful, in that this idea of overcoming imposter syndrome, it can't come from the external accolades. And I heard it in almost all of our stories. It's almost those external accolades and the positive reinforcement kind of makes it worse. Where stop beating me. No, I'm not worthy. I don't deserve this. I'm a fraud. And so your comment, and I wrote it down, that it has to come from the inside. Totally, 100%. I feel that.
There's few and far between, like fewer opportunities, I think, the older we get, to also have that external reinforcement. Like, how often did we used to get report cards? How often did we used to do midterms when we were in school? Like,
Yeah, as you get older, you actually feel, you only hear about things when they're not going well. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah. And like,
yeah.
I know there's probably a lot of like moms on the call, like zero achievement oriented ability, especially when they're young. Like, they're their own entities. You can't control them, but there's this idea of being a good mother. Like, what is that? You know, if you are a person that attaches your own sense of value and success to a thing you can check box, like, being an adult is not very conducive to that anymore. Not that it ever was, but it isn't. And I think being able to find, and oh my God, it's so much work. And like, I'll speak for myself. I don't have this sorted out at all, but to be able to believe in and of yourself that the positive things around you are worthy of is so much. It is so much work. It is so hard to do.
Well, and it's so interesting too. I mean, I'm having my own reflection right now of how many of us that are experiencing imposter syndrome actually go out and seek that validation, thinking that's what the cure is. I'm a people manager of some extraordinary human beings, and those one-on-ones, it's, am I doing okay? Am I doing okay? And I'm always so shocked. I'm like, of course you're doing okay. You're amazing. Like that. I literally have very little constructive feedback to give you, and I do that myself to my boss. Like, I don't know. Am I doing okay? And I wonder too now, like, maybe that's us just all trying to stop feeling like a fraud. Tell me I'm good. I want
please test me and tell me I'm okay. Give me an A.
Give me an A. Give me an A plus.
Well, you know, I think that you can get that with people you really trust, a circle around you that's going to be honest with you. And that's what I've found incredibly important. You know, you don't find many of them, and there's few of them, but when you find them, hold on to them. There's people here, I know some of them are in the call, that I know I can say, can you just tell me, this is what I'm thinking. I know you're going to be honest with me if you think I could do better. And I know you'll be honest with me if you think I'm on the right track. And that really helps, because you know you're getting the feedback you need. But at the same time, it's a safe space to do that.
So on this vein of, I mean, us even maybe having some reflections now of like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that I was experiencing imposter syndrome. Can any of you share how you recognize that what is happening to you in that moment is imposter syndrome? And do you have any tips or tricks on how to manage? I'll start with Emma.
Okay, so I'm going to reel off a bunch of things that my therapist has told me to do that I don't actually do on a regular basis, but I try to do. So I think for me, a lot of what I've needed to do in overcoming imposter syndrome is recognizing that I am not my thoughts. My thoughts are something that I do. and my thoughts are, as I said before, they're not an accurate mirror of reality. They are conditioned by how I grew up, the environment that I'm currently in. They're not they're not a perfect, rational reflection of the world. And there are certain ways that my brain behaves that I've learned, for whatever reason, I've developed certain pathways, certain well-worn pathways where I will have a thought and then I will go to this thought and then I will go to this thought. And I've developed that pathway in order to protect me or whatever, but it doesn't serve me anymore. And I think the way that I react to imposter syndrome instinctively is taking that well-worn pathway, and what I am trying to do is build a new pathway where I take myself out of those thoughts and recognize that, yeah, I am not my thoughts. I do not have a perfect mirror of reality. Some actual practical things that I do. So I had a meeting a couple of months ago, actually, where wonderful human being who I'm delighted that I get to collaborate with asked me how to spend an enormous amount of money on sequencing data. I was the sequencing expert in the room, and I obviously had opinions on how to spend that money, but the proper cool grown-up who does nice science was asking me how to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I was like, no, you need a grown-up, right? And yeah, I recognized that was happening to me, and then I tried to get back into the room, to get back from out of my brain into the moment, and then carry on. And then after the meeting, I was really worried that I'd come off hesitatingly, unprofessionally, in a sort of junior way. So there was a colleague of mine who whose opinion I trust, and afterwards I was like, hey, can I just check in with you? This is how I felt. Was that what actually happened? To which his response was no. So checking in with somebody like Laura, you mentioned. What else? When I'm trying to support graduate students, I find that in academia, we don't necessarily give a lot of positive feedback. So I try and make a point of mentioning when a graduate student that I work with has done something well, because they won't necessarily recognize that. And it's something that they can add to their list of things. It's a nice thing that they can add to their mental list of things that proves that they are competent and that they're doing okay. And maybe they can have a real list and they can refer to that whenever their brain starts to act up. So yeah, those are the sorts of things that come to mind for me. I don't know if any of those are things that any of the other panelists do, or if there are other things that they find useful.
Yeah, I can jump in, and I love that you started, Emma, by saying there's a lot of things that my therapist has told me to do and I don't practice them because I am the exact same. She has told me, Lily, you should have this, a journal of all of the things that you did well today. And I remember when she first told me that, I was like, what do you mean today? Like everything's going to be bad today. And how would you, do you really want to speak to yourself in such a mean way? What would your best friend say to you? Speak to yourself like you're your best friend. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not. And, it just goes from there. I find it very hard to implement the tools, and I don't really know what that is about. And I have this, I don't know, I think it's a funny story. the past little while, you know, COVID has been hard. And one of the things that she told me to start doing was like to take sticky notes. I love sticky notes. Jenny can resonate with this. We are sticky note people. And write down on a sticky when things go well. Yeah. And so I have this little like makeshift office space for myself at home. I'm currently not in it because the Wi-Fi is so bad. Yes, there is Laura's sticky. And I started a sticky wall and it was just right beside me, and it was going really well. And I was like, this is good. I can do this. I can keep track of things that I am proud of, that are minor wins in all areas of my life, not just work, but being a mom, being a human that is not just about work and mom. And then one day someone was like, I love your sticky wall. It's like, oh my God, you can see everything. You can see all of it. And I had this complete panic that like everybody knew. Everyone knew I needed to do self-talk. I needed to, you know, whatever, like, bump myself up a little bit. And just that whole, and I also had to ask a friend who was on the call, what can you see? Can you see all of my stickies? And it's just such a funny experience to me because, you know, it's this thing that you are trying to do to help yourself, you know, believe in yourself. And with that, it still is even hard to do. And it took the help of someone else to say, A, no one could see that, you're being crazy. And B, like, that's awesome. And it's all totally accurate. And so I think like actually having that practice, maybe don't do it like in view of your work webcam, but having that practice of like writing down exactly what you, even if it's something small, like I made breakfast for myself, or I made dinner for my family, whatever it is, I find to be helpful. But, you know, if for those of you that are on the call that find it hard to do that kind of stuff, you are not alone. It is hard to be disciplined about being kind to yourself, which is weird, but true.
Well,
Yeah, and Lily, I might say, sorry, Jenny, do you want to?
go for it.
I might say, actually, let it be in your webcam view, because I think that's the issue, is that we think it's weird that we need to do this because we've never seen anyone else do it. And we've seen all these successful people and our mentors, and they never had to do that. What's wrong with me that I have to do it? And so maybe we do need to show other people that these are actually normal steps and necessary. And for me, what's helped actually is, you know, I'm a service motivated person and I really love helping people. And so doing this just for myself is hard motivation for me, because I felt like, okay, it wasn't fulfilling. But then as I started seeing how my examples and behaviors affected other people, or I started seeing, you know, I work a lot with students, amazing students, like the smartest, most amazing humans on the planet. And when I see them experiencing it, it breaks my heart because I think they're amazing. And I think, okay, if I can pull myself out of this, I'm giving an example to somebody else, and maybe that'll help them. And that's like drawing that motivation of like, who are we leaving out of the project, of the initiative, of the way we redesign our cities, you name it. Who are we leaving? Who is imposter syndrome or experience leaving out? And if we don't help fix these issues, then we're not going to have their voices at the table. And that's just tragic from my point of view. So I try and draw on that to, even when I don't feel like it, pull myself out, help pull other people out, to say, I see it, I recognize what's happening. I know actually now exactly when it's happening. It starts off with me making excuses for accomplishments, like you were saying in the beginning. And when I see other people doing it, and just trying to draw on that and say, I'm just going to pull you back in because we need you. And it's harder for me to do that to myself, but helping others has helped me do that. And we could all do it for each other. I think that's the point of this conversation. Call it out, recognize it in yourself, recognize it in your colleagues and your friends, and try and support each other in it.
Great. Well, Lily, I was definitely struck by your example because I think you've hit this new thing that I'm now going to call imposter syndrome inception, because you had an unwarranted sense of insecurity about how you were managing imposter syndrome.
Yep. Perfect description. Perfect description.
And so I heard a lot in your responses about accomplishments and not believing in that. But let's also think about the opposite in times of rejection. And I'm sure that that just as much can probably fuel imposter syndrome. And so can anyone on the panel share your experiences about bouncing back from rejection?
I think for me, that requires reaching out to the people around me. Like when you said that, the image that occurred in my head was all of the times that I've had a sort of emergency coffee break with like close colleagues and friends who've helped me commiserate over my failings, and or not necessarily failings, just, you know, missing out this time. Because sometimes it's just a numbers game and there are, you know, X number of people applying for Y and you just have to wait your turn. And yeah, I find that reaching out to the people around me helps me put that sort of thing in perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to plan to deal with rejection. You have to have a plan in place. Because it's, and for me, so I know what my plan is, and I think everybody's is different. I go through, you know, if you want to talk about rejection, like it's every day in academia, a paper, a grant, you name it. There's a rejection all around you, and it's hard. It's still hard. The first one is just as hard as the last one. But, you know, thinking through what the tools are. So for me, I know I need time. I need to be mad actually for a little bit. And I need to let myself just be mad. And so maybe for a day, I don't want to talk to anybody, or I need to vent to someone around me, and I just need to do that. And then step one, I think what Emma was talking about, getting validation. And then over time, you know, as I practice at being better at accepting rejection, I realize that it works out, things work out sometimes, and sometimes actually rejection is a good thing and is necessary. Nobody can achieve everything at all times. And in fact, sometimes that little bit of reassessment actually is what makes us better. But having a plan is what I would say, and everybody's plan is going to be different. Not just assuming that it's just going to be okay. We're just going to get through, just going to tough through it. It's tools, it's people, and allowing yourself to go through whatever process you need to go through.
And if I can build on that, because my immediate thought was my own personal experience where I got rejected from my MBA the first 3 times I tried. Not once, not twice, thrice. And I think for a lot of people, at least my own personal experience, is that I see my super highly motivated friends are the ones that experience imposter syndrome. And when they hear you need a plan, then everyone is going to go and be like, okay, I have to, my plan, it has to be the best darn plan ever to figure out how to manage rejection. And really, sometimes your plan can be super simple. And my plan, if I didn't get into my MBA the first time around, was, you know what, I'm going to take 4 months off. And exactly to your point, I just need some time. I need to decompress. And I'm going to become a bartender. And admittedly, like, it was younger Jenny, I was a bit more like of an asshole about it to my parents. I'm like, I'm giving up. I'm going to become a bartender. And so don't let me fool you. It wasn't as eloquent of a plan. But in retrospect, that's exactly what I needed. I just needed time. I just needed time to sit and think and be like, okay, yes, I didn't get in. Now it's not the right time. The universe has something else for me. And at the same time, I'm going to have a really fun job and a really fun summer. So I totally agree with the plan. And then also just caution everyone, it doesn't have to be the most perfectly thought out plan. That's just going to feed your imposter syndrome. Alrighty. We have a bunch of questions that have been coming through in the chat, and I have to admit that I have not been able to keep up with them, but I am very, very thankful to Laura, who has been collating them and texting them to me. And so thank you to the folks, and I'm going to take one of the questions from the chat. Please do keep sending them in. And one of our amazing community members, panelists, has asked if you can comment on how you can be confident but still have imposter syndrome. And do you think that confidence and imposter syndrome are mutually exclusive?
I saw that question come in, and I think it's a really good question, because I can see about myself that I can project like a confidence. And I try really hard, especially when I'm have a speaking engagement, which happens a fair amount in my work, is to seem confident. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that they can and do exist at the same. That little one sounded so cute. They can and do both exist at the same time. And I think that just because you have imposter syndrome doesn't mean that you can't also feel confident sometimes. Like, things would be so dire if we didn't have our moments where we knew we were doing great. And I think that for myself, at least, I kind of know what those are. I seek those out. I try to put them into routine in my life. I ask for those opportunities. And I think it's in some ways kind of a coping mechanism, because I can make sure that, you know, at least a couple times in the week, I'm doing something that makes me feel confident, makes me feel strong, makes me feel, you know, great about myself. And I think that it's an important, at least for me, it's an important tactic in terms of kind of battling an underlying self narrative, which is you're not good enough to be here. I try to routinely prove to myself that I am.
Thank you, Lily.
Yeah, and I think I see Callie made a really important point. I think one of the challenges, and again, this affects everybody, but I think disproportionately can affect women in certain settings, is the idea that if you confidence isn't exactly rewarded necessarily. Sometimes it's seen as a bad thing. And that's a huge challenge that, again, feeds into this, that when appropriate, you can't be confident at everything at all time. That's that you know, gold standard I talked about at the beginning. It doesn't exist. But there may be aspects of your life or your work that you can be confident on, and others where you're not. And so I think it's really important to deal with that. Again, not just for yourself, I would say calling it out if you're seeing it happen around you, and making sure we're improving the space around us. So if someone sort of makes a comment about someone being confident and it's coming across as inappropriate, just calling that out, I think that's important for all of us to work on, because I do see when individuals are speaking up about being confident, appropriately so, and then they get taken down because of it, and then that's it. That confidence never shines through again, and the imposter ideas start. So I think that's important. That's a responsibility that all of us can have.
And it's a great segue into another question that very similarly came through, that was asking about, so then what's the balance? What's the balance between having this feeling of imposter syndrome, trying to overcome it, but I don't want to come across as too overconfident. Heaven forbid me as a woman have the audacity to have overconfidence. Does anyone?
I think the balance is authenticity. That's what I would say. So it's about being confident when you feel like being confident, and being able to show your vulnerability when you're not sure. And again, when I'm in my safe space, that's how I am. I can be very sure of something, and I can be very unsure and worried about something. All that it can exist in one person. And I think that's where we have to learn to accept. And we don't see a lot of that. We don't have a lot of models of that. So to me, authenticity is the balance.
That's wonderful. And I also am reminded by Emma's comment earlier, and Laura, I think you said it as well, is just, so it's number one, surrounding yourself with the right people. And then Emma's comment was also being sure to give good feedback and ask for good feedback along with the bad. And for the UHNers on the line, we have this caring safely principle called 5-to-1 feedback. And then with everyone in your circle, you should aim to, for every one piece of negative feedback, have you given 5, and kind of bolster each other. But also, Laura, I like the comment, what, we're allowed to be multidimensional human beings? That's crazy. No. Alrighty. There are so many questions coming through. Do our wonderful panelists have any suggestions on how we can help each other, women's, minorities, groups, to be better allies? So as we talk about building this network that helps us to overcome, how do we become a better ally to our network?
I can jump in, but I think there's so many different ways, and these are only just a handful of ideas. And like, you know, we definitely, I think personally, this is a journey in terms of like being open about imposter syndrome and figuring out ways to support through a network approach is a new way of thinking about how we deal with our own psychology and our mental health. So I don't necessarily have a ton of experience in this. You can hear the imposter syndrome thing happening right now, right? But I think like this type of a forum is huge. And I think one of the key takeaways that I'm gonna try to do from, I think Laura and Emma, you both touched on this, is around positive feedback. I'm lucky in my job. I have the opportunity to give people chances to do stuff that they want to do. Like I can say, hey, so-and-so, you're going to present this, or so-and-so, you are going to lead this chunk of work. And I think for me, one of the things I want to do is when I put somebody in that position, especially a woman or a visible minority or somebody that may feel like an imposter, to marry that with a lot of positive feedback, with a lot of encouragement. You can do this. You deserve to have this. This is, and I don't know if that, you know, I don't know if that's the right answer, but at least it's something that I think might help. I know if I experienced an opportunity that way, it would sure make me feel better about taking it on, no matter how scared I was.
Yeah, speaking for myself, I actually like difficult feedback sometimes but you know, when I'm seeking it out, it's quite different, right? So if I go to someone I really trust and say, you know, I'm really struggling with this. I need you to be brutally honest. Do you feel like this is the right way, the wrong way? The trick to that though, is that it's in a safe space and it's with someone that I feel safe doing that with, because you can't be that vulnerable with everyone. And so I guess what I would love to see this conversation go, and there needs to be many conversations, is how we're fostering our environments and what role do we have. And I think even the initial research on imposter syndrome is really focused on individuals' thinking and behavior, and it's really important. But there are some structural factors here, and there's environmental considerations, and there's workplace environments that unless we work on those, all of our individual tactics aren't going to be as effective as they could be. So how do we collectively actually work on these and call out the you know, structures that are there that might be problematic?
That's, I mean, an incredibly important consideration. And Emma, I know that you had brought up this idea of allyship to begin with, so I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this question.
So there is one student that particularly comes to mind here, who, anonymizing, and I don't think they'd mind me mentioning, but they were a master's student while I was at Imperial in Imperial College London, in, would you guess, London, and they just like emitted this aura of not believing in themselves, which was really weird because all of, like, when they were going for master's project rotations, the project supervisors were like a little bit fighting over that person. Like, they were absurdly talented and just delightful to be around, and they were just a joy to work with. But you could see it, like you could see it when they walked into a room, that they didn't feel like they belonged, that they didn't feel comfortable. And so I made a point of reaching out to that person, and giving them like just a little bit more of my time, like making sure, checking in, like don't wait for them to check in with you, you check in with them, because one thing that I've found with mental health related things in academia is that people are really great at hiding what's happening in their brain. They become an expert in camouflage, and I think that it's important to reach out to the people who seem to be doing well, just as much as it is to reach out to the people who seem to be struggling, because you can't tell what's happening behind there. Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. And I feel, I mean, I don't have children. I don't know anything about raising children, but I feel, so maybe Lily, this resonates with you, but I feel like, or if there's teachers in the room, that so often the people that require the support, like so outwardly require the support, are the ones that get the attention and get that help. And so Emma, I think the concept of just because someone on the outside, and I think we've heard so much that imposter syndrome, it's happening up here, it's not happening out here. And so reach out to the people that look like they're doing great and just ask them how they are and tell them they're doing great. I think that that's super actionable, that every single one of us can go out and take from here. All righty, next question. Do the panelists feel that we could celebrate failure better or differently, so that we can unlatch ourselves from valuing ourselves based on successes? Ooh, what a great question. I don't know the answer.
Well, I don't know the answer exactly, but I need to say, like, I put this in the chat. So there's the achievement monster. Who's heard of the achievement monster?
I haven't.
He is, or she is, sits in your gut and is never full, ever. You can never put enough achievements in that monster's mouth to be full. And so I think about the achievement monster all the time, because it's a never ending. So when something doesn't go right, or when achievement isn't reached, I just remember that it's a bottomless pit. So I don't know if the achievement monster helps, but I really actually visualize the achievement monster with the bottomless pit stomach in my gut a lot, and try to remember that and put that in perspective.
That's awesome. So whenever I think about celebrating failure or being okay with failure, I think we all do it. It was a learning experience. It was fine because it was a learning experience. And I can't decide. I would actually love to explore, is that good? Like, are we doing the right thing, or are we all just fooling ourselves by just kind of, is that our way of hiding failure, not actually addressing it?
I know I'm off.
For me,
Go on.
like, I think in the same way that on social media, we're more likely to talk about the time that we found $20 on the street than we are the time that we had, gastrointestinal flu. We're more likely to project our successes than we are our more difficult moments. So and I feel that leads to this culture where I'm judging myself, my successes and failures against just the successes of the people around me, and that's not a fair comparison. I think one way that we could remedy this on a small scale, just in our little corner of the world, is to talk more openly about our failures, to talk more openly about our difficult times, and maybe not to even think of them as failures. Just because we didn't get X does not mean that we have failed. It means that somebody else has succeeded, and that's not the same thing. Yeah.
I also I love the framing of just because someone else has succeeded doesn't mean that you have failed or that I have failed. And I think I probably need to remember that myself. Lily, you unmuted yourself.
No, I was just going to say, I think like ownership of failure is very challenging. But Emma, like everything you were saying about trying to not have it, not even really see it, the absence of a desired outcome as a failure. Like just because you didn't get the desired outcome doesn't mean it's a failure. Like failure is such a cruel word. And I think, like, I'm just thinking about this now, listening to you guys, like if we can find a way to remove that from our own like dialogues about ourselves, and encourage other people to do the same. Like, no, don't call it a failure. It's not a thing. It's no such thing.
Well, I think about science, right? Like we have 99% more failures than successes, actually in everything. And so those failures are necessary. And so, yeah, I'm with you, Lily. I don't know what the term is, but they are a necessary part of evolving and creating things that actually improve us as humans. So they're actually necessary.
Yeah, or they just chart a different... Go ahead, Emma.
I think there's a point here, and that's like something that I've been struggling with for a long time, is just accepting the fact that I am a fallible human being. I'm not some, like, it sort of relates to that idea of the gold standard that we've been talking about. Like, I am a squishy bag of skin and organs, and I'm allowed to make mistakes, because it is completely unrealistic to believe that I will not make mistakes, that everything will not go exactly as I hope it will. Yeah, so I think a lot of what I'm doing, like with my brain at the moment, is just accepting that I'm a human being. And actually, one thing that's helped in that, which relates to something that came up earlier, is reframing my imposter syndrome as a sort of arrogance. Like, for some reason, I am the exception to the rule. I know that this happens to all of you and all of the people around me, but for some reason, I'm the exception to the rule. I am in some way specially broken, and thus imposter syndrome, what I'm feeling is not just imposter syndrome, it's something more fundamental than that. I'm the special king of failure. I don't know.
Well, I think too, I mean, just thinking of all of your comments, if what we've kind of explored today is that confidence is one of the solutions, if you will, to imposter syndrome. Lily, your point about like the ownership of failure, like what is the most confident thing you can do than, can't get my word out, like what is the more confident thing that you can do than own up to failure? Like you have to be pretty darn confident to actually go up and own up to your mistake, and you have to be pretty confident to then say like, no, actually I'm being really arrogant by feeling this imposter syndrome. So This is great. I'm gonna switch us to our final question, because I want to make sure that we do have enough time to explore this concept. And I'm going to shamelessly read it from my phone to make sure that I give the question justice. What is, it's a call to action. So, because I've been doing some little summaries, I've been doing some reflections. But based on everything that we've heard today, panelists, what's the one thing that we're all going to commit to do differently and show up differently to role model to others as a result of this conversation?
I'm going to say check in. Check in with someone if you feel it and help them work through it. Be that receptor for them to help them work through it. And hopefully if everybody does this, you can have a pretty impactful change.
I like that.
These are the kinds of questions that I like, my imposter syndrome kicks in, because I'm like, what if I give the wrong answer? But I think that...
Well, I think I just gave Emma's answer, so you could just do that. Emma's the one that brought up checking in. So sorry, Emma.
No,
I just really liked it. Yeah.
I think it's great. Sonia, somewhere in the chat, said the cookie thing, which I think is like the Cookie Monster achievement monster. And I think for myself that's like a huge thing. I think what I'm going to try to do is, I guess it is in the same vein of checking in, but make sure that I'm more effusive, I guess, is that the right word, or open about, insecurities that may come with taking on something new, and trying to be a supportive and reassuring voice, whether that's at work, at home, like athletics, whatever. I want to try and do that.
Emma.
I think I'm going to try and actually take my own advice. Because I say these things and I know that they're true, but I don't do them because, yes, for some reason I'm the exception. And I'm going to try and start doing these things for me rather than the people around me, because I found that in terms of like practical day-to-day being a functional person at work, what's motivated me is the fact that, like, so I'm a master's student in a lab who a couple of years ago said that they looked up to me, and I was like, why? I wear my underwear inside out an embarrassing amount of the time. Like, what are you looking up to? I don't understand. But that was a really important moment for me, because it taught me that I don't have the luxury of feeling this, and I don't think that's really been a healthy way of dealing with it. So I think I'm going to try and start doing these things for me rather than doing these things so that I don't let other people down, which is also important. But I feel in terms of really changing my environment and myself for the long term, I have to do it for me.
That's awesome. And I mean, one of the big things that I've taken away from just my own like research to prepare for today and just today's discussion is, for me, what I'm finding is the most powerful thing to battle imposter syndrome is to admit that I'm feeling it. Like, I'm very good at repression, like a top-notch repressor. And that's not good. I mean, it's not good for a number of other things. Like, I loved Katie's comment earlier where it's like, we need a whole session about like things my therapist said that I haven't actually listened to. So topic for another day. But just the idea of, as soon as I'm feeling it, like turning to the person next to me and be like, hey, do you kind of feel like a failure too? Like, are you feeling this too? And then being like, yeah. I'm like, oh, great. guess what? Neither one of us are failures. That's amazing. What a powerful moment that will be. And I cannot wait to action that. Oh, goodness. So I do want to be cognizant of time. We have 10 minutes left. I'm going to pass it back to our fearless leader, Laura DeVoe. To close it off, I think she has one last or two questions.
I have one, and definitely not fearless. The only reason I'm wearing a colored shirt and not a black shirt is because this is virtual, and if I started sweating, nobody would know. Otherwise, there's a reason I always wear dark colors when I'm in front of an audience. Awkward moment. Now everyone knows my secret. So just a quick comment and then a question for all four of you. So Emma, you talked about feeling like you don't have the space to be an imposter when others look up to you. And I just wanted to take a moment to sort of shine some light on that comment and say that among other things, like The Lion King and Harry Potter and How Much I Want a Cookie Right Now, this conversation has taught us that it becomes exponentially more important to be transparent and authentic when people look up to you. And let me just take a moment to say, like, there are people, including those in the Women Who Lead team and those who I work with in my day job, that are part of this panel right now in conversation. And I am terrified every time I'm transparent that it will undermine my credibility or those external things that I've achieved. But to not be myself and to not model those things is more uncomfortable than that. And so I just wanted to put that out there that, you know, I don't really want to frame it as like take the lesser of two evils, but let's be the people that we needed someone else to be for us, and be the people that we need each other to be. And so that brings me to my question for each of you. The question came up earlier about sort of what we can do for each other. And we've talked about the need to do more for ourselves. So I'm going to reframe that question in a way that hopefully tackles both of these things. What is something that you need from your friends, colleagues, or community to help you with imposter syndrome? Like, you know, one thing, two things, what have you. I'm gonna let there be an awkward 10-second pause so you can reflect, so that nobody feels like they're the center of that pause. So I'm just gonna take up airspace and talk about random things right now while I watch Jenny smile. And so do any of you want to tackle that first? So it's a bit of like modeling the vulnerability of what you need, but in that, know that you are equipping everyone that's on this Zoom call and that will listen later with the strategies they need to not only be comfortable in their own insecurity, but also support others that we clearly know are feeling the same way. Who wants to go first? I don't know if that's a hand, Lily, or if you play with your hair when you're nervous. Okay, awesome.
Hand up.
Lily?
Because I'm actually so excited about this question. And thank you for asking it, Laura. What I would like is for people to reduce their expectations of me and to help me give myself permission to do the same. Lower expectations.
Jenny, I'm bouncing over to you next.
I know, I feel like my answer is wrong, which like we could really
Stop it.
I know, like we could really unpack that right there. The first thing that came to my head, and this is like, I need to explore it out loud and think out loud. The first thing that came to my head is I need people to stop telling me that I'm great and to stop telling me that I'm doing a good job. And that's what, like, I did like my research or my nerdy thing. I wanted to be prepared. But like constant reinforcement of like, oh, you're doing great, blah, blah, blah. Like I stopped believing it. And so it's almost to, I guess then as I'm thinking out loud, I would like that positive feedback to be more maybe thoughtful or concerted rather than, which completely goes against what I just said about 5-to-1 feedback. But it's something about constant good reinforcement somehow just triggers my imposter syndrome to go crazy.
It's funny that you say that, because from a lot of people in my life, get the comment that I'm hard to compliment, because the way I experience that compliment is like, you just feel obligated to say that. And it, you know, two things that I'm just going to put out there for people to sort of chew on as we go to Emma and Laura. But we've hosted conversations before around the experiences of racialized women. And one of the things that has come up is them saying, don't tell me I'm articulate. It sounds like you're surprised. And that's what I just thought of, Jenny, when you said, like, don't tell me I did a great job. It sounds like you're surprised. And that sort of thinking could be a source of reinforcing imposter syndrome as well. But also, to be a little bit more action oriented, if someone does want to give you positive feedback, it could be the specificity of that feedback. So it's not the generic, you did great, but like, I was really impressed with how you transitioned the conversation, or I was really impressed with how you took control of that room, or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden it doesn't become so repetitive. It becomes very specific feedback about the situation. And I say that as someone who loves giving positive feedback when I feel like it's warranted. So I'm also taking note of my own advice. Emma, I'm going to bounce over to you to see if you have an answer to our question.
One, take the compliment, take it as a gift, like, and just let that happen. Like, two, I think I need the people around me. I need to identify exactly whose opinions I respect on various subjects, and then for those people to give me feedback on those subjects, specific feedback. And I need that feedback to not, like, I need that to not, the first thing that they say, I need that to not be about the fact that I'm at the intersection of various things. Like, I do have these intersectional identities, but I am also just a person trying to do science, and sometimes I don't want to be, like, I don't know, the poster child for queer, gender non-conforming brown people. Sometimes I just want to be me. And yes, I do take that responsibility really, like, to heart. Like, it's really important that I'm vocal about those things so that other people can see that there is a place for people like us in science. But that's not all that I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to improve health outcomes in ovarian cancer. Let's start with that, maybe. Yes, that's where my brain went.
That was great, Emma. And I feel like I'm speaking for a lot of people that I say every time you speak, I just feel like, you know, when you just have that sigh and you're like, yes, like this person. And there's been so many comments in our chat as we've been talking that I've been able to read because I didn't have to worry about speaking, where people have essentially said, I feel like you're speaking to me. And I just felt like it was important to acknowledge that verbally instead of just in text form. Jenny, I'm also going to ask you to pop up the QR code if you don't mind, as people are signing off, just in case anyone wants to join our mailing list. And then Laura, over to you to close it out with your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with what everyone's saying. Going back to authenticity, I need authentic feedback. I think one of the challenges when we structure feedback that it has to be this way or that way is we stop believing it. So we stop believing the good and the constructive. And so authentic feedback is really what I need. And I couldn't really say it better than all of my brilliant panelists before me.
Wow, it's like Laura has this magical ability to make sure we're exactly on time because we have 1 minute. Oh, no more minutes, but I'm still going to steal a few seconds. Thank you so much to all four of you for showing up, being vulnerable, and I think most importantly, being authentic. Although you've all highlighted the need to do that, it's one thing to highlight it and another thing entirely to model it. And although I'm sure I'm going to hear from all of you, you know, how nervous you were, that your palms are sweaty, or maybe it's just me. Clearly, the activity in the chat and the number of people that joined us speaks volumes about the impact that this conversation will have, and I'm sure the ripple effects that will that many others will benefit from as a result of this. So as two final points, thank you to all of you. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And my final call to action is think of all the things that resonated with you today. And even if it's just one or two, because the list is too long, let's make a commitment to model those things for others and ourselves. Because one of the easiest ways to internalize some of these helpful ways of thinking are to first do it for others, because that's an easier place to start. So wherever you're at, whatever you need to do, know that there is a step you can take and that step will make a big difference. So thank you for joining us today. Feel free to tweet at us, send us a message on LinkedIn, email with your feedback, and light up social media with the brilliance of these 4 humans today. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everybody.